Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is a brand new year. It is Tuesday, January 3rd. Hopefully, you had a nice winter break to celebrate the holidays and get a period to slow down the fast pace of a Full Sail, where you got a nice break and reprieve there. And welcome back. Here we are in 2017, and we're going to get started with game music composition. My name is Chris Latham, and I'm the course director for game music composition. And we've got a lot of very cool things to discuss this month. Who knows? Maybe you even spent some time over the holiday break playing video games, or maybe somebody in your family is playing video games. And we're going to talk a little bit about the music creating music for a video game, the process of how that is done, the creative side of how do you start from a blank slate or a brand new game and determine what type of music needs to play back, how much music do you need, where does it all go, the creation and production and composition of the music, and then also a little bit of the technical side of how does the music actually play back. A lot of folks that are interested in music for games, they understand how to make music and the creation of it, but how do you make it so when a player has a controller in their hand and they hit buttons and they do particular actions that you get the correct piece of music or the correct audio playing back at the right time, and the music fulfills the emotional requirements for the game, and it swells in there and feels like it was meant to be the entire time. And already we have a very good example of that in the chat here. Skyrim. Skyrim has amazing music, and there's a great behind-the-scenes video available about the music and how they wrote their own language so they could record their own chants for the game, and it's a pretty massive game overall. And how do you populate a game like that with music so that when you arrive in that particular part of the world, or you encounter that friend or enemy, or have those battles in the game, how does the music change and react according to what is going on? The music, we'll talk about how the creation of music for a game, how it is similar to other media, and also what is unique and different about the creation and composition of music for a game. It's the same in that it is still music, it is still recording, it is still composition, it is still music production. You are realizing the creative goal and direction of a game project, and it's on you to realize the music that is needed to pull those particular emotions or those react to the different actions that are going on in the game. And it is still instruments and theory and composition and orchestration and production of the music. But there's also unique elements in the fact that music for a video game does not exist in one linear piece of music from beginning to middle and end of the game. When you pretty much any other form of media that you, any other music that you create, or any album that you listen to, television show, movie that you watch, the music exists in one linear form. And that's very much how we are accustomed to listening to our music, where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in our music, we create structure around that. We have intros and verses and choruses and bridges and solos and outros, and there's form and structure to our music so that we have control over how it progresses. And when you put that into a movie, every time you rewind back and play through that movie and watch that movie, the music and the sound effects and the dialogue all play back in the exact same way every single time. Basically, there is a 2 hour long audio file that represents the stereo or 5.1 surround mix of that movie that you watch beginning, middle, and an end. But in video games, you have no idea how long something is going to take or when a player is going to reach that particular part of the story or that particular part of the game. There is no necessarily beginning, middle, and an end. There's a general structure and there's a general flow of the story, but some people are going to run through the game guns a-blazing and go fly through it as fast as possible, maybe even skipping and missing certain parts of the music and the soundtrack. And other people are going to be going around in circles, bumping into walls and falling into traps and taking a very, very long time to solve their way through puzzles and progress through the game. And your music has to react to that. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to get to that particular part of the game or defeat that big boss battle at the end, but once you get there, there's going to be a piece of music that's ready for it. And so we'll talk about how you create music for a medium where you do not actually have ultimate control over the final playback of the game. There is an element that there's the interactive element of once you put a controller into a player's hands, all bets are kind of off in how they're going to go through and play it. Everybody's going to play it differently. And even more so in more modern, bigger, advanced games, maybe like Skyrim, there's no telling that you have to go through the story from A to B to C to D and go all the way through. The game can go off in any sort of direction, and the player has a lot of control over that. And that is the interactive element of the gameplay. The player plays through that story. They are the hero of the story, and the story unfolds at their pace. And our music also needs to react and unfold at that pace. So we're going to talk about how do you create music for a medium where you don't know the final result or the ending or the outcome of it. How do you prepare a piece of music for that? So we'll talk about the creative aspects. We'll talk about the technical aspects of how all of this works together. One thing that I want to point out pretty early on, I have 2 disclaimers about the class that I want to throw out there quite early. Number 1 is you don't actually have to be any good or playing video games at all to be successful in this class. Your skills at playing a video game, your ability to control it or get the highest score or the fastest time or have any sort of experience with actually playing video games is of no importance to being successful in this class. I know that folks coming through this class have a wide variety of experience with games. There are those that love games and eat and breathe games and play games all the time and are up on all the newest and latest games and technology and how it all works together. And that's great. I can nerd out with you all day long about games. That's me. I'm playing games and making music for games and audio for games, working on games, all that stuff. We're going to be talking about all that. But I also understand that there are folks coming through this class that haven't been playing video games or haven't played video games since they were throwing quarters into Pac-Man or playing chess or Minesweeper on their computer. Maybe played some Super Mario back in the day, but haven't been playing games. And that's perfectly fine also. Your experience at playing games is not of importance or a requirement for this class. Now, while you are here in this class, we will immerse you into the game industry. We'll be talking about games. We'll be talking about music in the context of a game project. And the skills that are required of you are the ones that you've been gaining through this entire degree program, the skills that you've been building all the way through of the creation of music and the realization of a music soundtrack for a creative project. So we take the class from the point of view of you are, I'm a game developer. I have games that need music. I've hired you as the music composer, and your job is to create the music soundtrack for my game project. And I will provide the game, and I will provide information and documentation about how the game plays, and the overall aesthetic, and the theme, and the intention of the music. And then it's your job to take that information and interpret it in your own way, and realize the music that is necessary for that game. And so the skills that are required are your understanding of music theory and composition, your understanding of all of your tools, your DAWs, your sample libraries, synths, effects processors, being able to not only write the music, but mix it and format it and bounce it and name it properly so that it actually works in the game. So that's disclaimer number one, is you don't have to actually be any good at video games to be successful in this class. And the things that are required of you are your skills in the actual composition of music. The second disclaimer that I always want to throw out is, it's a question that I typically get pretty early on in the process, and that is, do I need to be able to code? Do I need to know code or how to be able to program to be successful in the games industry? I know music, and I want to write music, and I like video games. Maybe I want to take take the opportunity to work on some video games. Do I have to be able to also program in some C++ programming language, or some other common programming language in order to be successful at music? And the typical answer to that is no. Again, your skills and creation of the music is what is most required as a music composer for games. Now, of course, any set of skills that you have and that you grow over time will always be more valuable overall. But just in the same way that their programmers are not going to be able to write music, their musicians or their composers are not necessarily expected to be able to write code. Those are two very different paths of knowledge and understanding. And so there is a technical aspect to what we will talk about, and how your music is actually working in the game, and we'll discuss those elements. But your ability to code or program is not really is not a required skill overall. We have we've had the former audio director at EA. We're here in Orlando, Full Sail's in Orlando, and so here also in Orlando we have Tiburon Studios, game studios, a part of EA Sports, or Electronic Arts is the publisher. Electronic Arts is across the world. They have a division called EA Sports, and EA Sports makes some of the biggest sports games out there, like Madden, football, PGA Tour. They used to do NCAA. They do NBA Live. They do some FIFA. Well, they do a lot of FIFA. Not that particular studio, but worldwide. And I don't know, some other very popular EA Sports titles. Here in Orlando, they do a whole bunch of production on Madden football. So we've had the audio director come out and speak to our students. We have a lot of students in all sorts of different degrees and disciplines that go to work for EA and EA Sports over the years. And one common question when he comes to speak to our students is, do I have to be able to program? I'm a recording arts student. I am a music production student. I know audio. Do I need to also know how to code to be successful in the game industry? And his answer is, if you can create and design sound effects, then that is one set of skills that is valuable. If you can create sound effects and make music on top of that, then you're pretty useful in the audio team. If you can make sound effects, create music, and code and program, then you're probably a unicorn, because those people don't really exist too often. So again, those are disciplines that are quite separate overall. So your understanding of music theory and sound design is the strongest set of skills that are required in the industry. So that is a little bit of the overview of the class. Let's see. I'll get into talking about all of the assignments for week 1. That's kind of our main focus here in a bit. But let me run through a couple of quick things about the class. As I kind of mentioned before, the classes topics are divided up into 2 halves. More in the beginning of the month, we talk more about the creative side, determining the music that you will need to create and how much music and where does it all go in the game, from the composition side of things. And in more of the second half of the month, we get into the technical side. Okay, you've created a whole bunch of WAV files, a whole bunch of music. How does it actually get into the game and make it all work together? We'll talk about some of the tools like game engines and game audio middleware like Fmod and Wwise. We'll get into some of those topics of how it all gets put together. Our classes, we have our Tuesday and Thursday classes. Our online sessions here through our Go-To training sessions. On Tuesday, this Tuesday is a little bit different than the rest because it's a lot of introductory material, overview of ideas in the class. But in the second half, and in all of our Tuesday classes, the real focus is to get into the actual new assignments for each week. So week 1, 2, 3, and 4, we'll describe all of the new assignments that are coming up and go through them and give examples and talk in detail about each one. Starting next Tuesday, we will focus on peer review also. So all of your assignments are due the Sunday of each week. So hopefully you've taken the opportunity to take a look at FSO, download the new week 1 assignments. Excuse me. Download the new assignments, at least by our Tuesday class, so you can take a look at them and understand a bit of what we're talking about. But by Sunday, you will have turned in your first round of assignments. So starting next Tuesday, we'll do some peer review. There's an opportunity to turn in your compositions, and we'll load up each one of those through the live class and load them up into Logic and take a listen to them and give some feedback and review. Everybody will get an individual grade sheet, but that's a great way to get a lot more detail. If you're able to come to the live classes, then we can you can ask questions and we can discuss and go back and forth overall. Question here in the chat, will there be archives of the Go-To training sessions? So yes, we are recording everything on our Tuesday and Thursday classes, and then I release them typically Wednesday and Friday. So the next day they will be available. I post them as an announcement on FSO, and it's just a click. You can stream it to watch it or download it. So those are available each day. So if you can't make the live class, I understand. Just please catch the archives each week for our Tuesday and Thursday classes, and that will keep you up to date on what's going on. So Tuesday classes. Tuesday is basically peer review and new week's assignments. Thursday is topics in the industry, whether we talk about different jobs in the industry, we talk about the technology, we talk about how do you start a brand new project and figure out the type of music and how does it all piece together, different setups and structures for your game music, and a wide variety of topics in the industry. So Tuesdays and Thursday classes, archives released the next day. Yeah, that sounds pretty good for an overview. Like I said, we'll get into our assignments here in a bit. That is me. Again, my name is Chris Latham. I'm the course director of the class. I've been with Full Sail for about 14 years now. 2000, maybe 15 coming up in April. Holy cow. And I started out over in recording arts before there was a music production degree program. Started out in the studios, in post-production, like in the recording studios and the post-production studios. That's kind of my background. Before game audio was more in post-production for radio and television, commercial work, music, sound effects, dialogue, commercial work. And I've always been a gamer, loved games my entire life, play them, really started dissecting them and figuring out how all of the audio worked. Really wanted to figure out how I could play more and more video games, and determined that if I was actually making video games and working on them, that I could probably get away with it a whole lot more. And so I started focusing more of my attention in the development of audio and music for games. And so then Full Sail kind of got on the game audio train about 7 or 8 years ago when we started the it was called the Advanced Interactive Audio course on campus, which was basically game audio. And then the Music for Games class in the music production program. This class came along about 3 or 4 years ago now. And so I jumped over here to start this one up. So that's my history. That's where I am at. So whatever interests you about games, or whatever interests you about audio, music production, recording, studios, hardware, software, gear, I don't know, all that sort of stuff. Or, of course, the class, if you have questions about the class or the assignments or any of the topics or anything like that, please reach out and we can discuss anything you would like. iChat and email would probably be the best ways of getting in contact with me. I am teaching on campus on the opposite days, on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And so, and then I'm online on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I'm often away from my desk phone, out teaching somewhere. So if you call, you can leave a message there. But if you do get my voicemail, then send an email to follow up, so I can always respond to that a bit quicker overall. Beyond that, I have a audio production company, contract game audio company called Engine Audio, where I work on a number of different projects, and currently working on a couple of games, multiplayer game called Depth, which is Sharks versus Divers. It's available on Steam. And worked on with EA Sports. Been working on with them a couple years. So Madden 2017 just got released. Worked on the dialogue, some of the dialogue editing for the announcers in those. And what else? Couple of VR projects and iOS projects and mobile games and all that sort of stuff. So lots of fun stuff with games and audio and sound and music and any of those aspects. So if you have any questions concerning the class or just the topic as a whole, please let me know. Really, the focus of this class is to introduce you to this side of the music industry, of the entertainment industry, to expose you to game projects and to show you that your music is just as viable in a video game as it is on an album, as it is in a television show or commercial or jingle or movie or anything. As you get later on in this degree program, the past couple of classes that you've been going through show you here's music for commercials and jingles and clients, and here's music for television and media and film. And you come into game music composition and we say, hey, here's music for games. Just to give you an idea, maybe you give you some exposure to this part of the industry to say, hey, is this kind of the stuff that you might enjoy? Some people fall in love with it and want to dive into it a bit more, and maybe weren't necessarily thinking about that direction and want to explore further. Other folks come through this and go, maybe that's not so much for me, and my interests lie elsewhere. But just that's perfectly fine also. Just to kind of show you what is entailed, what the role of a music composer working on games is, and the types of projects that they work on. So goals of the class, number one, of course, is to write music. That's kind of why you're here in the entire degree program, and we give you opportunity to do that with a couple of different games. So I should mention that. In your game music composition class, we have a series of working Mac games that need music and sound effects. So you have 3 game projects that you'll be working on through the first 3 weeks, and really into week 4 also, but 3 games introduced in the first 3 weeks. And each game requires a different type of music, a different approach to the music, how the music is actually working in the game. It's a different type of game with each one of them, and they are fully functioning Mac games. So by the end of the month, you will have 3 game projects with music and sound effects that are completely custom with your work. And you can play them on your computer, you can upload them, put them on a website, put them in Dropbox, share them around. We'll do video captures of the work, and so you'll have material to add to portfolio, demo reel, to show what you have worked on in games. So number one, of course, is to write music in the context of a game. Number 2 is play video games, right? This is a very important. I have a very important concept in my class, which is called game research. And game research means you should be playing video games. You should be paying attention to games. Number one, yes, it's all well and good and fun to play a game, but it's also to be listening and with a critical ear and paying attention to what is going on with the music and the sound. So whatever part of the industry you are interested in, you should immerse yourself fully in that part of the industry. So if you want to be working on a music album, you want to be the artist, you want to be the producer, you want to be a recording engineer, recording and producing, engineering an album, you should be listening to a whole bunch of music. You should be paying attention to the credits, paying attention to who the artist is, who the record label is, the producer is, what studio did they record it in, what gear did they record it. Listen to all different types of music, genres of music. Listen to good music, listen to bad music, listen to popular music. Why does good music and popular music may not mean the same thing always at the same time? Just listen to every possibility in the music industry to pay attention to what is actually going on, what's successful. If you're interested in the film industry, you should be watching a ton of movies. You should be paying attention to the soundtrack. How does the music shift and change with the image on the screen? Pay attention to the credits. Pay attention to behind the scenes features that you can get. Pay attention to the composer, the director, the producer, the production company, how they created in every aspect of the soundtrack. It just so happens that if you are interested in games, you should be playing tons of video games. You should be playing different types of games, paying attention to the music. Again, yes, it's fun to play video games, but also paying attention to how the music and the sounds shift and react to what is going on, being up on all the newest and latest games and game companies and technologies. Who is the game developer? Who's the game publisher? Who is the game composer? What are the audio team? Can you get any behind the scenes videos on music and sound, any of that stuff? So it is very important, a very important concept. If anybody asks you why you are playing more video games this month, you say, I am doing game research. I am paying attention to what is going on in this game and in games as a whole. So, and I wholeheartedly agree with the comment here in the chat. Donovan, my recommendation to pick up for game study is Doom 2016. It won sound design and soundtrack at the Game Awards this year. It is just so good. Absolutely. I am fighting my way through Doom right now. It is absolutely amazing. Doom and Quake, Wolfenstein were some of my first games that I was playing on PC and learning how to tear them apart and mod them and change them. Learning what a game actually was and hearing Trent Reznor and from Nine Inch Nails do the music for Quake way back 25 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, is amazing. And now Doom 2016, the new one, has Mick Gordon doing all of the soundtrack, and it's absolutely amazing. And then you mentioned the Game Awards. I watched a little bit of it, and it's wonderfully cheesy in its own way, but it was pretty amazing to me, being into music and being a composer and making music for games, to watch Mick Gordon be up there with his band playing the live music from the video game. It was just very, very, very funny and strange and all that to see a music composer actually get up there and perform all of their parts. It was just like a rock star. Was really cool to watch overall. So definitely, if you don't have any games to play, there's the Mac App Store. There's always free games in there. There is the Steam Game Store, which you can download free games for Mac. There's all sorts of fun ways of going about it. So certainly a goal overall is to play video games, pay attention to them. And with all of this music writing and video game playing, there's also a lot to learn. There's also a lot of knowledge to be had, a lot of ins and outs of how these things work together and play. So those are the types of things that we will be discussing through the month. So let's get into the assignments. Let's get into the games themselves. The assignments. Number one, most important, is don't fail. Keep up with the class, and let's really, what I'm talking about here is how to be successful in the class. And number one is download all of the assignments as soon as you can. Download the games, download all of the documentation. Each week you get the game, which is a Mac application. You get a video of the game so that you don't have to go play the game every single time. You just want to check something out. And you get PDF documentation about the game, how to play it, the music, what is required from the music soundtrack, and overall what's typically known as a design document for the music soundtrack. So as early on, everything's released on Sunday at midnight, Monday morning at midnight, and just download everything Monday morning as soon as you can, and read through the material, see if you have any questions for our Tuesday or Thursday classes, and run into any issues or problems by Friday so that we can work out any sort of issues. I'm going to be less helpful over the weekends overall, so you might not get a response until the next Monday if you have any issues. So just try to take a look at it and get into the assignments as soon as you can. The other suggestion that to be successful in this class is to do the revisions. Each week you have the opportunity to revise any of the material from the previous week's assignments. So you will receive grades and feedback each week. So the assignments were for week 1 were already released. You go download those, check through them all, and work on the assignments. You turn everything back in the next Sunday. Then I grade everything through that week, provide you grades and feedback, and then you have until the following Sunday to make any changes, make any updates to those assignments. That's the best way. The people that are most successful in this class are the ones that end up doing the revisions. The grades often swing very widely in a positive direction after the revisions because maybe the first time, it's probably the first time you've ever worked on music for a video game. And I don't necessarily think that you're going to hit it out of the park the first time every single time working on these games. I know that whenever I work with a game client, the first couple of times is probably no, 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 no. Every once in a while, I send them the first draft and they're like, perfect, that's excellent, don't change anything. But most of the time, makes them feel good because they feel like they're getting their money's worth, because if they suggest changes and we work with it back and forth and go round and round. So there's opportunity each week to do revisions and take those opportunities, because it's basically like a roadmap into how to be successful in the assignment. Not only do you get a better grade, that's all well and good for the class, but you get a better project. You get a better piece of music for your game project each week. Here's a general breakdown of the assignments. Your game compositions are more heavily weighted each week, with the creation of the music and the format and delivery in a specific way to work in the game. Technical assignments are often creating the sound effects for the games, or this week it's doing a looping assignment. The looping assignment is the music loops are extremely important in games, because music loops allow you to sit in one place musically, waiting for somebody to solve a puzzle or to defeat an enemy or to move further into the game before it progresses on. So we'll talk about how loops work for our game music. Production technique, and the similar line, is taking an element of your game composition, formatting it and preparing it, and working on a particular technique to utilize for games. And the first week there's a discussion post, a kind of a softball question of what's your favorite game, what is a favorite musical experience or memorable musical experience with a game? Do you play games? What games are you playing currently? Just to get an idea of everybody's experience with games in the class. All right, so now here for the rest of the class, we're going to discuss our week 1 assignments, starting out with our first game, which is called 2D Platformer. But before we dive into this, let me take a quick pause for a minute or so, and I'll come right back into it. Let me know if you have any questions. You can post those up in the chat. All right. So we are going to get into our talk about the games for the month, starting out with our first game that we're starting out with here in week 1, called 2D Platformer. And when you download the game, you get an application. Let's see, where am I? Let me get to where I need to be here. Here and here. You get an application icon that looks like this. And when you double click on it, it pops up this window, and you can change your screen resolution. You can try out the whatever. You don't have to change anything at all on the screen. You can just hit play. But if you want to make the screen bigger or smaller, the window, or you want to make it full screen, you can turn off windowed mode. The game isn't really all that amazing in graphics quality, so probably any one of these will work, and they might even just look the same. But more than likely you could hit play and it will play and work just fine, but if you need to, maybe you can change out some of the controls there. And then you're also given a video, and I'm just going to reference the video instead of playing the game while I talk. And here is 2D Platformer. And 2D Platformer is made by Unity Games, and it is made in the Unity game engine. We'll talk a lot about what that means throughout the month, but it's kind of like saying Pro Tools or Logic in a very loose way, but it's kind of in the same way that you record and create your music in a DAW like Pro Tools or Logic. Saying I created my game in the Unity game engine is one of the main tools that is used to make games. If you play a lot of mobile games, either iOS or Android, you've probably played something that was made in the Unity game engine. You might even be familiar with the Unity game engine, or may have seen the logo here pops up at the beginning in a lot of mobile games. But they are the game company that created the game tools that all of our games are made up from, and created these free demo game projects for us to work with. And the first one here is called 2D Platformer because it is a 2D platformer game. It is two-dimensional, meaning that you just basically go left and right and up and down. You don't go in and out of the picture in any sort of way. And it is a platformer game in that you run and jump between different platforms. Platformer games have a long history in game industry, meaning that, all the way back to Super Mario Brothers, Mega Man, Metroid, were all very popular platformer games of just basically running and jumping and shooting or punching or jumping on their bad enemies' heads or whatever it was. Lots of games in that style. And it's a great type of game for us to start with. Very open and simple and straightforward for us to a good introduction into these types of games. So let me just set this to loop here. Let's go around and around. And so 2D Platformer, the game itself is kind of a ridiculous game. You are a bean with a monocle and a top hat. Let's see here. Right. There you go. You're, I guess, a bean-looking thing with a monocle, top hat, a mustache, and a bazooka. And you are fending off the alien invasion. The aliens have invaded London. You can see because this is London Bridge. It has fallen down. The alien spaceship has landed on the London Bridge. You can see Big Ben is broken in the background, and the London Eye is all broken up. So you are there to defend and defeat all of these incoming aliens. As a game, there's not much going on. Let's say this. There's not much progression. There's just a score, and it gets bigger and bigger. There's really no end to the game. It's very much a demo to show off how our music works and how it all plays back and sound effects, and it's a really fun little game. But all of our games this month are a sliver or a slice of a much larger game, just one level or one part of a much larger game experience. So the gameplay itself is pretty silly, wacky gameplay where you're kind of defeating all these cute little green or red aliens that are coming in and attacking. So the music is just going to be as silly and fun. The game is probably meant to be all ages, family friendly. So the music is going to be lighthearted, nothing too dark or menacing. But I do leave the genre up to you for this first game project. The style of the music, the instrumentation is a little bit more open. So whatever you feel, whatever genre you feel most appropriate can work. And in this first one, we're more focused on getting everything set up to work properly in the game. Of course, you want a great sounding soundtrack, but it's really open in the style and approach. Once we get into our later games, that'll be a little bit more specific in the overall aesthetic to the music. Okay, we'll come back to that a bit. The next thing that you get right along with this is you get the PDF documentation, the 2D platformer music design doc PDF. And this is just a text overview, a lot of kind of restating a lot of what I am saying here. Project overview talks about the game itself and generic ideas of the music, which I'll be getting into here in just a sec. Game overview. 2D platformer games have a long pedigree in the game industry. Classics like Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong, and Metroid. 2D platforming games, modern varieties like Limbo, Braid, and Jetpack Joyride. A lot of the platformer genre is still quite popular overall. When playing the game, you can use the arrow keys, or if you're familiar with PC gaming, W, A, S, and D. But using the arrow keys, you can go left and right. You can use the space bar to jump. Let me go back. Right, left and right. Use the space bar to jump. Left click on your mouse to shoot. And right click will actually lay bombs. Every once in a while, you'll see these power-ups. Like this is a health power-up here. There are bomb power-ups that fall from the sky somewhere. There we go. There's a bomb power-up, and once you get that, you can lay a bomb here, and it'll explode after a few seconds, and you just press right-click. So just play around with it. Again, your ability to actually successfully play the game is not as important as your ability to successfully create music. So, back here. The instrumentation. Really, this is where I want to get to. The asset list. And these are the files that you will end up creating. For this game, you will create a total of 9 audio files. There are 3 categories. You have intro music, main loop music, and ending music. And then there are 3 variations of each one of those. So you have 3 intros, 3 main loops, and 3 endings. The way the music works in the game is that when the game starts up, it randomly chooses one of those intro files. Then when it's done playing that, it randomly chooses one of the main loop files. And it will continually choose a new file each time the previous one has stopped. And it will just play through that as long as it needs to in the game until the game is over. And the game is over when you lose all of your health points. And then it randomly chooses one of these endings. So notice that the intro files are 2 bars long. The main loop files are 8 bars long. You have 3 8-bar cues. These are going to be most of your music in the game. And then when the game's over, you'll hear one of these 2-bar endings. And I'll play examples here in just a sec. But let me do this. Jump back over here. And let's play through this. So, when the bean here, Mr. Bean, drops down to the level, or the game starts, basically, then somewhere the game goes, okay, the game has started. What do I do now? All right, well, there's 3 different intro files. Randomly choose one of them. The game knows that there are supposed to be these WAV files. The game knows that they're supposed to be named exactly like this. If you do your part, meaning that you create these 9 files, you name them exactly like this. They're the correct number of bars, either 2 bars or 8 bars. All of them are going to be 16-bit 44.1 stereo files. So if you do your job and you create these 9 files, then the computer or the game does its job and says, okay, there's one of these 3 intro files. Randomly choose one of them. All right, it's going to play intro 2. And the game doesn't know anything about your music. It just knows when the file starts and when the file is done or when it stops. So game starts and it plays intro 2, and it plays it for 2 bars. And it's only 2 bars because that's what we've defined it to be. So once those 2 bars are done, then the game says, okay, I'm done with those. Now what? And it looks, and all of this is in the code somewhere. Somebody's made this all happen behind the scenes, and we don't need to worry about that. But somewhere it says, okay, now there's supposed to be 3 main loop files. Again, if we created those on our end, we composed the music, we are in our DAW, we made the music, we bounced it out, and we named it music underscore main loop underscore 01, 02, and 03. Those are 16-bit stereo 44.1 files. Then the game just plays those, and it will play those infinitely as long as the game is active. You may notice there's a health bar right above the bean here. This is how much health that your character has left. And the game will play these main loop files as long as the game is still going. So it will randomly choose one of them. It'll randomly choose main loop 3, and it'll start playing it, play through 8 bars, and then it's done, and it'll randomly choose main loop 1. Then it'll randomly choose main loop 3. Then it'll go to 2, and then it'll go back to 2, and then 1, and then 3, and it just jumps around as long as it needs to, for as long as the game is playing. And that is basically, the game is over when you lose all of your health. So as long as you haven't lost your health yet, then it'll keep randomly choosing those main loop files. And as long, you've composed them, they're 8 bars long, and they will play smoothly and seamlessly. And that's your job as the composer. Now, boom, as soon as that happens, as soon as he loses the last bit of health, right, it's a little slow. Right, so just a little bit of health left, no health left, he's going to get hit one more time, boom. The game knows when this happens, right? The game says, oh no, character's lost all of its health. And it goes into this little death animation and it falls off. He drops the bazooka kind of fades away. And he falls into the toxic sludge below. And the game's over at this point. So the game is playing one of these main loops. You're not guaranteed at any time which one it chooses or which one it plays. It's just randomly firing them off. Hey, 8 bars, boom, plays another 8 bars. It doesn't even know that they're 8 bars. It's just whenever it's done, it fires off the next one. All of a sudden, your character loses all of its health. And the game says, stop, wait. The game's over. I'm going to have the character fall off. And we're going to immediately stop whatever was playing, right? Let's say it's halfway through main loop 2. It's going to just stop that, cut it off, and go directly into one of these 3 endings. And it randomly chooses it again. And it plays the ending, and from your point of view as the composer, the ending cues are musical resolutions. They all need to end or resolve the music that was playing in main loop, in each one of those main loops. Your challenge here as the music composer is you are not guaranteed in any order that these are going to play, except for it's going to go intro to main loop and then eventually to ending. You don't know which intro is going to play. It's going to go main loop 2 and then intro 2, then main loop 1, and then ending 3. Just any combination that it randomly chooses. And that's perfectly fine, because on your end, this will all make sense if you keep everything in the same key and you keep everything at the same tempo. The way this music seamlessly works is that it waits till the end of the file. And if you write your music, let's say you wrote it at 135 BPM in 4/4 time signature, and you wrote 2-bar intros, and then you wrote 8-bar main loops, and they're all in the same tempo. Well, when it reaches the end of one, it just randomly fires the next one, and it makes sense because you've composed it that way. If you were switching keys and switching tempos and time signatures in each one of them, it would be like a bad DJ, switching from one tempo to the next and not seamlessly crossfading between the records. So keep everything the same tempo. You only have 8 bars. You really can't explore too far off into any other key or do tempo changes or key changes. And then the ending. You aren't guaranteed where it's going to be when it ends. It could have just started main loop 1. But when it ends, it just stops the previous one and immediately goes into these endings. It's like da 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 or da 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 da. I'm trying to sing the end of Mario. That's why I do music in the computer and not sing. But it's a strong, sudden resolve ending to your music. So that's a lot of explanation. Let's actually play something instead of me singing through this. Let's do this, and let's do... I keep closing my folder. Week 1 game comp. Let's load this. All right, so I have, for example, 4 examples here. Probably play 2 or 3 of them. But we have 3 main loops over here, right? So this is, first track would be one student submission. This is another student submission, and so on. So we have 3 main loops. We have 3 intro files, music intro 1, 2, and 3, and 3 endings. And they're out of order like this just because this is how it imports alphabetically. But the main loops are going to be most of your soundtrack, right? The other ones are only heard at the beginning and the end, and these just randomly switch and change around. So let's listen to this, get an idea of what we're talking about here. We'll start with the main loops just to get a sense of what these sound like, and then jump over to the intros and endings. So, 8-bar loops. The music needs to loop. When it reaches the end, it needs to resolve back to the front. It needs to be able to loop and return back to the top of the loop. So, loop. All right. And each cue needs to have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. What instruments you use is up to you. What style or genre you want to use is up to you. But your music composition needs to have drums, needs to have a bass line, needs to have instrumentation that creates harmonic progression, and needs to have a strong melody on top. So then it goes into the second loop here. Third one. Now, notice that they all seamlessly transition into each other. They could go in any sort of order. We could go back to 2. Let me do it like this. We could go back to 2. We would go to 1, and then we could go to 1 again, and then we could go to 3 again. Basically, when you reach the end of any one piece of music, you reach the end of any one of them, there's a three-way fork in the road. You get to the end of the first cue, and it can jump back to the front of that, start 1 again, or it could jump to the beginning of 2 or jump to the beginning of 3. And it's completely random, so it could jump to 3 and play that 5 times in a row. It probably wouldn't, but it has the possibility of that. So that is some of the challenge of this, is that these have to be able to play in any sort of order. And one of the best ways of doing that is you should probably always start out on the tonic on your first chord. That way, whatever your progression is, wherever it goes off to, you always know that each one of these is going to resolve back to the tonic. So sometimes you can get away with starting on the 4 or the 5 or some other chord in there, but you're pretty safe to always start back on that tonic, or at least determine one chord or a single chord to always start with, so you know that it's always going to head back to that. So, main loops, 8 bars, they need to loop, no pops, no clicks, no gaps in the files, and a strong lead melody that develops and changes over time. I guess I should also point out that each one of these cues should be made up of the same groups of instruments. The drums should be consistent across all of them. It shouldn't be the same pattern in each one of them. Maybe the hi-hat pattern changes a little bit, where the kick and snare is, just shuffle and change a little bit from one cue to the next. Bass line, still the same bass instrument, but the bass line changes a bit. Chord progression, still same chord, or still same instruments creating those harmonies, but chord progression, harmonies shift and change a bit from one cue to the next. Melody, you can change the lead melodic instrument. That would probably it's like the whole band plays together, but each one of them takes a solo in each one of the cues. Could be that way. You could have the same lead instrument in each one of them, but consistent instrumentation will help unify all 3 of these cues. You don't want it to sound like 3 different bands playing the same song or different parts of the same song. That also goes into the intros and the endings. The intros and the endings need to utilize the same instruments as the main loops, right? The drummer can't just stop when it reaches the ending. The intros need to use all of the instruments to build up into the main loops, and the endings need to use all of the instruments to resolve down and end. Here in the chat, when you say composition needs drums, do you mean percussive elements, or do we need a drum set? Just looking for clarification. Drum set or drum kit is typically like kick, snare, hi-hat, pretty strong progression pattern. Is pretty well required for these cues. Having percussion elements in there is certainly fine also. There are other, like some of our other games may fit just percussive elements overall, but this one typically works better with kick, snare, hi-hat pattern overall. But it doesn't have to be, like this one is more acoustic instruments. We'll see some other ones that are more synthy electronic here. All right, so again, this is where we were with our main loops. Oh, that's an intro. Main loops. So here is 3 intros. Again, the intros need to build and rise. The very end of each one of these intros, you kind of want to sit there and hang on some chord. Sometimes you maybe just hang on the 4 or the 5 so that it resolves back to the 1 on our main loops. So this might be intro 3 going into main loop 1. All right, so musically it transitions. Watch out for this cymbal crash. That's something to watch out for because it won't actually decay into the next one. So let's try another one of these. And you should always listen to the different combinations, see how they work together. All right, so they kind of build up, building in anticipation before it drops into the main loop. And here's intro 1 into main loop 1. So consistency in instrumentation helps make the transitions smoother. Again, here's all 3 of them. Watch for those cymbal crashes at the end that might get cut off. Same goes with loops here. We'll talk about that. And then 3 endings. They need to end or resolve the music. All right, so all the instruments, drums maybe do a fill or a final roll to a cymbal crash. Everything ends there. Bass line resolves back to the tonic. Chord progression resolves back to the tonic. Melody resolves back to the tonic. Everything, I don't know, hits that last chord or note and resolves solidly on that last at the end of the cue, and it needs to have time to fade out to silence. These actually get cut off at the end, I believe. Got to watch out for that little bit. So make sure everything fades all the way to silence, or even better, these actually end on beat 1 of bar 2. So where you use the first bar of the ending to resolve, and then that last note it hits on beat 1 of bar 2. So let's listen to our second example here. I think this is more electronic overall. Here we go. So still synths, drums, bass line, chord progression, lead line, change. Still the same kit overall, but some change from one cue to the next. Kind of a halftime feel through this one. I say don't change your tempo, but halftime and double time works. Still keeps you in that same sort of pace or same bass tempo while changing the pacing of the music. And not everything goes double time. Maybe some elements either double or half, whichever way you want to go. Intros. Now, I would say these are not a good example of intros, although it is good to show off some things that you want to avoid. This I wouldn't really consider an intro. I would consider this more like a 2-bar loop. I mean, it might be cool as an element to before it heads into the next part, but there's no build to it. It's just a 2-bar loop. It just goes around and around. Same thing over here. Now there's a little snare roll at the end, and it's the very kind of the basic element is to have a little bit of snare build, but you should use all of the instruments, everything, to create that rise in anticipation before it goes in the main loops. And 3 endings. This is where it resolves in the first bar and then ends on beat 1 of bar 2. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So that's an approach, and to make sure everything fades out and has time to reach silence. Maybe another example. Let's jump down here. This is much more synth based, but it's got, I believe this is the one that's got a strong lead. Yeah. So, big lead line, drums, bass. There's not much harmonic elements, but it's kind of buried back in the mix. But solid changes in the lead line from one cue to the next. Each one of them transitions into the next one. And 3 intros. Those are more like traditional EDM intros, white noise sweeps, and kick and snare rolls and builds. 3 endings. These work well because they are lots of effects you can use. I've heard some really cool stuff with the endings. Remember that your character just lost all of its health points. It just dies and falls off the level and the game's over. So I've heard some cool stuff where things might not resolve solidly back to the tonic or resolve on some sort of half resolution that kind of throws you off, and that goes into a whole bunch of distortion or big reverb tail or just all sorts of different effects like this. There's a delay there. So some like pitch ramps like that can also work. So a couple of different examples there of intros and main loops and endings, and hopefully that gives you an idea or a couple of different ideas of how you might approach this composition. And actually, let me show, those are all the end results. Let me show you a composition session, like a production session, where with all the MIDI and the audio in the development of the music. I would suggest that you set up your music something like this, where what I have here is 3 main loops. And what I've done is I created these blank regions at the top that are 8 bars long. And I separated them out so that if there's any reverb tail or anything that kind of goes off the edge, that I don't capture that. And I created a space for my 3-bar loops, my 3 8-bar loops. Then I did the same thing over here. These are 2-bar endings, and I have 3 endings. And I've got 3 intros over here. And then I just chose all of the instruments that I wanted. So I have organ tracks. I've got a couple of tracks of drums, a couple of tracks of pianos, tuba for the bass, bluegrass banjo, a recorded guitar part. So once I've chosen all of my instruments, I maintain the same instruments between the different cues, right? So my horizontal tracks are my different instruments, but vertically they are laid out in my different 8-bar and 2-bar cues, my intros, my main loops, and endings. So let's see if I can do this. Do it from down there. I'd rather do it from up here. Here we go. So let's see what I have. Well, I guess I should start this. I'll just start playing the whole thing. And turn it down. And let's see what happens. Oh no. Get rid of those. Why is it coming out very right heavy for me? Is that me? That's also extremely loud, isn't it? Where's my output? What's going on here? I'm missing something very basic. Oh, output 2. There we go. Still very mono. we go. That was weird. Okay. So I have 3 8-bar loops, and they are made up of a little bit of drum kit here. So like I said, I created like sectioned out 8-bar loops, wrote my drum patterns, right? So each one of these got a slightly different pattern. And then we got tuba in there, bass line. What else did I throw? Piano. Kind of outlining the chord progression. Little banjo is the lead in there. Actually got guitar. Banjo is the lead part. Some organ. And same sort of thing. Drums, guitar, tuba. This time the tuba takes more of the lead. Third part. Pianos take more of the lead. Need to do some mixing here. So then once I have all of my parts here, I write some intros. Some intros. Using all the same instruments. And everything just kind of builds up into that final rise. And 3 endings. Oops. 3 endings. With everything space in between to give it enough time to fade out. Cool. Here in the chat, can we use Logic or Contact guitars, or do the guitars need to be recorded live? I always appreciate live guitar. MIDI guitar is really kind of hard to pull off. Although, if you've got the new, Contact Session guitarist, it's got some cool stuff in it. So I don't rule them out 100%, but it's often one of the things that I pick out. But obviously, if you're not going to have live guitar and you want some guitar in there, give it a shot. And you don't actually, another common question is, you don't actually have to use Logic for the assignments this month. Whatever tools you want to use, whatever DAW you are most comfortable with in the creation of the music, feel free to use those. Again, your client is probably going to have no clue what tools that you use to create their music, just as long as it is amazing music. So we take the same point of view there. All right, that should give you solid insight into your first composition this week, 2D platformer. Next week, of course, we'll get into this a lot further, but next week your game is called Angry Bots. It is a third-person shooter. You are a mercenary trying to infiltrate a robot factory. So it's a much darker and grittier kind of game aesthetic, probably a much more electronic, synthetic approach to the music. New game and a new style and approach for the soundtrack. And then week 3, we throw away all of the synths and synthesizers and drum machines and effects processors, and we go strictly acoustic and orchestral composition. Our third game, actually very much in the kind of genre or style of Skyrim. We have an open world fantasy game called Palace of Renthalion. And the music here, the player can turn on any one of 4 pieces of music playing simultaneously, and they're basically 4 components of a one larger composition. And the player can turn on and off any of these pieces of music at any time. And we'll talk about how do you create music that needs to react and play as it was meant to be there the entire time, but you have no idea when the character is going to perform the action or get to that location or hear that particular piece of music. So how do we create music for a game when we don't know what is actually happening at any point in time? So different styles of games, different overall approaches to how the music works. I will start out our session on Thursday discussing your production technique of looping music. There's a couple of looping techniques that are important to discuss and that you will be using throughout the month. So I'll probably start our next session with a discussion of looping techniques. And then you will also be doing a game capture. I'll go through the process of capturing your music working in the game. I guess I should point out the documentation describes the process, but when you are done with the music, you've composed everything and you're ready to turn it all in. You're going to before you turn it in, you're going to test everything out in the game. You have the opportunity of placing your music into the game and listening to how it sounds as you play it back. And all of the instructions are described in the documentation. But real quick, when you have the game application, you can right-click on it and choose Show Package Contents. And it will give you a folder appropriately called Contents. And in there, you will find a folder called Data. And inside of Data, you will find a folder called Streaming Assets. And inside of Streaming Assets, you'll find 2 folders called Music and Sound Effects. And in there is where you will place your music. And of course, again, the documentation describes that folder structure. But the game is expecting those 9 files to exist in this music folder. So if you do your part and you create music, 3 intro files, 3 ending files, 3 main loop files, they're 16-bit 44.1 stereo wave files. They're 2 bars long or 8 bars long. They're set up to loop. They're in the same key and they're in the same time signature tempo and time signature. Then the game will do its part and play back those files correctly. You don't have to know anything about the game. You don't have to know anything about programming or coding. All you need to do is put those files correctly formatted into that folder, and the next time you play the game, it should magically work. If it doesn't work, that means there's something wrong with your formatting of your files. And if you run into any sort of technical issues, please let me know, and we can work through any of those issues overall. But once you test it out in the game, make sure it works properly, make any changes if necessary, then you will do a game capture using QuickTime. And again, on Thursday, I will discuss that process also. But that should give you a good solid starting point for your week 1 assignments. You can definitely download the assignments if you haven't already, play the game, watch the video, and read through the documentation and just start getting some ideas together for your game composition. And if you run into any issues, let me know. If you have any questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes here at the end. But let's go ahead and wrap up our class here, and we will meet again on Thursday. So if you have any questions, let me know in the chat. Other than that, you have a good afternoon, and I will see you again on Thursday. Thanks.